Hello, Macha. How are you?
കിളിപാടും കുളിരാവിൽ ഞാനരികിൽ വരും പറയൂ മൃദുലേ എന്തു പകരം തരും നല്ല തട്ടകിളിച്ചുടൻ പെട്ടില്ലെന്നൊരു മുത്തയിച്ചു തരാം എന്റെ പള്ളിയറയുടെ വാതിൽ നിനക്ക് തുറന്നേ തരാം ദൂരക്കിളി കുതിക്കും മാണിക്യ ചെമ്പഴക്ക ഞാൻ എടുത്തു വെച്ചേ എന്റെ വെറ്റില താമ്പരത്തിൽ ദൂരക്കിളി കുതിക്കും മാണിക്യ ചെമ്പഴക്ക.
സബാഷ്, അടിപൊളി. അച്ഛാ, വെറുതെ പാട്ട് ഞാൻ മറന്നിരിക്കായിരുന്നു. നല്ല നൊസ്റ്റാൾജിയ ആയിരുന്നു.
I know, like one of the golden songs of Malayalam cinema.
Yeah. Actually, that time is called the golden time period of Malayalam cinema. You know that? 1990s to 2000. Anyways, wonderful start. And welcome to our podcast, guys. Hope you're all doing well. And thank you for all the support you've given in the previous days. And today we're going to talk about something that's very relevant to which place? Where are we from? Guys, you want to guess?
Devathinte sondam naadu. God's own country.
Okay, what is the topic though? What are we talking about?
Today's topic is, you see, Kerala being a beautiful state, one of the problems that we face almost on a yearly basis are the floods. We all remember the 2018 floods especially.
Yeah. And I think it also happened. So 2018 was the first time it kind of happened. But I think there was also another one 2019, which wasn't as bad. But the one 2018, it got a lot of global attention as well. Pretty much everybody knows. I mean, a lot of the international news agencies also covered it.
Yeah. But Bacha, as being a medical channel, why are we talking about floods?
Well, what happens when unexpected things happen? There's always something to do with health. There's always something to do with health. Health is always impacted. When you have health is something that is of prime importance, and when the health system is compromised, it leads to problems. So also certain climatic changes or certain weather changes, things that we can't anticipate, when those things happen, they always bring along a bag of problems as a consequence. So today we're going to talk about the different diseases that could happen, that might have happened or might have happened in Kerala, but it could apply to anywhere where there's a risk of flooding or where there's an incidence of flooding. We're going to talk about the different diseases. We're going to talk about the kinds of diseases, a little bit on things you need to be careful about when there are floods, and that's it. So would you like to give it a go, Macha?
Absolutely. So see, the thing is, when we have floods, our main issue is that there is a lot of water in places that are not used to having a lot of water. So we'll keep this as simple as possible. When you have a lot of water and it stays still for a long time, it creates a lot of diseases. And how does it create a lot of diseases? There are three main ways. So there are diseases that come from the water itself, from unhygienic, unsanitary water. There are also from rodent-borne infections. And what do I mean by rodents? Rats, mice. These rodents essentially leave their droppings in the water, and this water then becomes infected if we drink it or ingest it somehow. The other one is vector-borne. Now, a big problem in Kerala, especially during the summertime, you'll see everyone with all these electric bats or just slapping mosquitoes.
True. I think that's more so due during monsoon time when it's rainy season, because that's when it leads to stagnant water, isn't it? So you have not every texture or not every land surface, artificial or natural, they're not designed to have slopes or designed to run water, because that's essentially only a certain time of the year where you have unprecedented pouring of water from above. So when that leads to stagnant water, it becomes a breeding ground for all the particular things that you mentioned. Yeah,
absolutely. So let's tackle these infections. And now, and I know for the general public, our aim here is not to scare you about the infections. Our aim here is to make you aware that the importance of making sure that water is sanitary, water is hygienic, and water is treated properly so that you don't get these infections.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to start with the most common ones that you might encounter, and with Macha here today, I want to tackle three key infections that are related to the floods.
Okay.
One is malaria, one is dengue, and one is hepatitis A. These are some of the most common infections that we can see. So, Macha, tell me, how does malaria happen in this circumstance?
So, absolutely. Maybe approximately 30 seconds ago, Machan, you had mentioned about the bat playing game. So it's something that's I think more common in Kochi, like especially from the movies at least, where for a period of evening time, all these mosquitoes come out. Mosquitoes come out, and so basically these mosquitoes are vectors. What is a vector? A vector is it could be an organism or any kind of carrier, basically, that carries infection from one place to the other. So mosquito is the vector that carries these infections such as dengue, chikungunya, and so on. So
malaria, especially.
And malaria.
Yeah. So with the problem with malaria is that obviously malaria having a very complex life cycle, as our med students and graduates know. To keep it simple, essentially when you have mosquitoes breeding from one area to another, and mosquitoes get infected with the malaria parasite, which is known as Plasmodium. There's 5 main different types of Plasmodium. That's an entirely different malaria lecture. Just to keep it simple, these mosquitoes essentially, once they are infected with that parasite, they come in, and when they suck your blood, that's when this goes in.
Yeah.
Right. This goes in, travels around. It can destroy your blood cells. It can basically reside in your liver for a long time, and in severe cases, it can hurt your kidney and your brain as well. Okay, so it's very important that once these floods do happen, and it's absolutely unfortunate that floods happen. The most important thing, primarily as a community, is to make sure that there's no stagnant water. Make sure that your area is sanitized, your community is sanitized properly, and the appropriate departments, sanitation department treats the water as well. There's an interesting study actually done in Kerala after the 2018 floods, where although, especially they were talking about the Malappuram district, where 100% of the water was properly treated with appropriate amounts of chlorine, and chlorine is toxic to these organisms. So, which was good. And the water sanitation was good, but there was still an outbreak of these diseases. Not malaria, but this comes to another rodent-related disease. It is rare, but in cases like this, it causes an outbreak. It's called leptospirosis. I know it's a mouthful, but these are basically, organisms that come from rats' feces. Right, that can infect the water and can cause very, very severe symptoms. It can cause conjunctivitis, liver problems, lung problems. So it's very important to make sure the cleanliness of water is highlighted in this podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's actually spot on. So we've covered vector-borne diseases. We've covered rodent-borne diseases. From, like I mentioned earlier, from natural catastrophes in particular, what happens is the healthcare system goes down. People have less access. And plus these diseases come. So that leads to more of an incidence of new infections and diseases. You had briefly mentioned about hepatitis as well.
Yeah.
And another scheme of infections are GI infections. So gastrointestinal. So like you mentioned, contaminated water. If your food comes into contact with it, or for example, you don't wash your hands properly after getting in touch with the flood water, and you basically ingest it, that would lead to gastrointestinal problems. Diarrhea is other symptoms, diarrhea, vomiting, and so on.
Absolutely.
And absolutely. And also, so one of the so what I meant with gastrointestinal, why I said hepatitis was that is the gastrointestinal infection that is most common. Hepatitis A and E, especially in areas like India, Sudan, and things like that. We mentioned mosquito and a few things that I mentioned. So to reduce the risk of waterborne infection, in terms of tips, it would be do not use flood water to wash food, like vegetables and things like that. Don't use that. Do not use flood water to wash dishes, in particular, because this is all a way of contaminating utensils or objects that you use to ingest. Use only clean water for. I know it's easier said than done, and access might be hard, but always try to use clean water to consume.
And if you guys have not if you guys can't comprehend the seriousness of this, I mean, especially after the 2018 floods, over 19,000 cases of acute diarrheal diseases were identified. Out of that, 846 people had malaria, 225 had leptospirosis.
Oh, God.
Those are the most common ones. I mean, 34 people had chikungunya, and 50 people passed away, of which 34 people were confirmed to have leptospirosis. Just from contaminated water.
I've learned about leptospirosis in the books, but I didn't know it was that common.
It can cause severe illnesses.
Yeah.
And leptospirosis is actually a disease known for outbreaks in catastrophes. So this Kerala flood is a good example, but also even volcanic eruptions as well. So there was a volcanic eruption in the 80s in the US called Mount St. Helens. There's a volcano over there that erupted, and it was sorry, I know going a little off topic. I mean, I'm a huge fan of geography, but it was in the 1980s, and it caused a massive eruption, a lot of fatalities, and a lot of financial damage as well. But one thing that was underrated was the fact that it actually promoted the transmission of leptospirosis, and you could see if you had plotted this on a graph over the years, there was a spike that year in the cases of leptospirosis. So it's very important, especially in natural catastrophes. Cleanliness of water can really help reduce the rates of many, many infections that otherwise can actually kill people. Absolutely. Which is why, I mean, you must have heard about constant cholera outbreaks in certain countries as well.
There's a lot of, because of the sewage system and, problems with the sewage system. So another infection we didn't address was waterborne infections. We did address the other ones, but waterborne infection like cholera and stuff are also very important. Also, when you have floods, that leads to destruction of the local landscape and local kind of drainage systems. So that would lead to sewage water getting mixed with the other water, and that's another source of contamination as well. Now, another thing I'd like to just briefly mention is not just these infections, it can also lead to skin rash. And if you have open wounds, for example, like injuries, open wounds, and if those wounds get in touch with the water, it could lead to other serious severe infections. So things to be careful about, tetanus and so on. Absolutely. And proper gear is important, especially when you're
go ahead. Go ahead. I felt like from what you said, this is a perfect time to sort of inform the general public in the sense that if you notice someone having an acute diarrheal illness, in the sense that they're having more than 4 to 5 episodes of diarrhea per day, yes, there is commonly an infectious process happening, but the most important thing to take care of them until they reach the hospital at one point is to make sure that their fluid intake is compensated for the amount of fluid that they lose. So for all the people watching this, if you're not a med student, obviously med student, med graduates, you guys know once patients in the emergency, bolus fluids intravenously and all that kind of stuff, absolutely. But if you're at home and you're waiting to get to a hospital, go to your nearest pharmacy. Every pharmacy sells oral rehydration solutions. Now, you may be asking, why don't we just give water? Why can't they just drink water? Because along the water, they're also losing electrolytes, sodium, potassium, chloride. They're losing important electrolytes that can cause severe symptoms in the patient if there's decreased potassium and things like that. So the most important thing to do, oral rehydration solution contains all these electrolytes. And if you give it to them, this will ensure that they won't go into a worse condition than they are in already. So please keep that in mind.
Absolutely. They're spot on, especially the oral solutions are very important, because if you were to just, you're losing water, you'd think just replacing water is sufficient, but you're not getting the electrolytes as such. So that is important. Another thing is, so that is from our end really, but if unfortunately we were to come, if natural catastrophes were to hit us, wherever you may be, India, anywhere around the world, make sure to follow the local guidances of your local authorities very closely and, kind of help each other and things like that.
For our med students and med graduates, I have a question for you. If you're watching this, tell me the exact acid-base disturbance that occurs in diarrhea. I want the full thing. I don't want just part of it. The full thing. Mention it in your comments, and we will tell you the right answer next time.
Yeah, that's it. So you have a bit of challenge there as well. Thank you, Dr. Arun. Thank you guys for listening. And Nandi.
Namaskaram. Pakala.